Hey everybody, how we all doing today? Teching 101 here. Welcome back to the show. Well, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but unfortunately it was finally time for us to say goodbye to Barry's father. His time with us was short, but will be remembered fondly. But don't feel too bad about your papa, Barry. He is currently on an all-expenses permanent vacation to beautiful Las Vegas, Nevada. He's rubbing elbows with celebrities. He's winning big bucks at the Luxor. Definitely not buried in an unmarked grave somewhere out in the Mojave Desert. Definitely not, Barry. He might come back again someday. Who knows? Anyway, I got a new sword for Christmas. You guys want to talk about that? Let's talk about that. My mom got me a new version of the Wado Ichimonji. Yeah, my mom is a big fan of One Piece. She loves Zoro, her favorite character. No, she literally just went online. It was like anime sword, and this was the first one that came up. But I was just like, oh, I could always use an extra Wado. Don't worry about it. My old one was getting a little bit, yeah, a little bit janky. See, the thing is with decorative swords, even if I only use them for videos, you know, they wear down after a while. This version is like probably like 6 years old. This one's a lot more, it's made of sterner stuff. Like even the scabbard looks a lot nicer. It's a lot more sleek, you know, check out the Wado, right? Pretty cool. So because of that, you know, swords and whatnot were on my mind. I decided to make a good, solid Silvers Rayleigh video. Zoro will be coming up, though. We will be mentioning him, as a matter of fact. But Rayleigh is low-key. In fact, not low-key. Rayleigh is high-key. One of my favorite One Piece characters. I am always down to talk about Silvers Rayleigh. If you ever see me out in public anywhere, like at a grocery store or something, and you just come up to me and you're like, "Teching Silvers Rayleigh," and I'm like, I know, right? Like, yeah! Okay? Rayleigh is awesome. He is effectively someone that has just won One Piece. I don't mean win One Piece like he has the One Piece, although he does know what it was. I mean, like, in terms of the One Piece world, the unnamed One Piece world, and all the intrigue and everything that exists therein, the world government, the Marines, the Yonko, the Warlords, the SSG, all the different pirate crews, the worst generation. I wonder what the best generation was. Maybe the worst generation is the best generation. But all of that stuff going on, if it was all like a video game, Rayleigh has won. Rayleigh beat the video game like 20 years ago and has just been spending the last 2 decades maxing out all of his stats and just hanging out, gambling, going to bars, hanging out with his hot wife. You know, Rayleigh is living the high life, ladies and gentlemen. The Marines can't touch him. There's no one that can touch him in your whole damn army. The world government is like, we don't want to deal with this guy. He's too much. Just him showing up at Amazon Lily was enough to get Blackbeard to back off. Blackbeard, who's one of the Yonko, by the way. Blackbeard, who has the power of darkness and the power of, like, the most devastating paramecia, Whitebeard's Gura Gura no Mi. Rayleigh showing up and being like, all right, kids, time to put the toys away and go to bed. That was enough for Blackbeard to be like, holy shit, I'm not dealing with him. And even afterwards, Rayleigh was even straight up. He was just like, look, I'm getting older. I'm getting on in years. You know, I don't have unnamed old man disease, but I'm not at my peak anymore. But even then, just with his reputation and his just intimidation factor, firing off hockey and everything like that, was enough for Blackbeard to like, yeah, say, oh, all right, I might be crazy and I might do a lot of insane stuff, but I'm not messing with Rayleigh. All right, I'll go quietly now. Come on, come along, Kobe. Let's go. And all right, okay. So one thing that's always been fascinating to me about Rayleigh is his epithet. So Rayleigh has a very specific epithet. Now, aside from his naming scheme, because his name is supposed to be in conjunction with Roger's name, like it makes like a parallel. So Roger's epithet was Gold Roger. His real name was Gold D. Roger, but the government and the world at large called him Gold Roger. And then you have Rayleigh, who's Silvers Rayleigh. So you got gold and then silver. You know, typically, you know, gold is considered like first place trophy, metal, like very precious. And then silver is considered, you know, second place. And then you have Scopper Gabon, who is, you know, copper, so bronze, copper, that's third, you know, the general idea. So that's like the naming scheme of Roger's ship. Is copper and bronze the same thing? Whatever, probably not, doesn't really matter. Point is, you got, you know, gold, silver, and then possibly copper or bronze. Okay, so that's just their names, okay? But when it comes to the epithet, Rayleigh's is, well, he has two of them. One is the right arm of the Pirate King, which makes sense. He was the right arm, the vice captain, the first mate of Roger's crew, right underneath Goldie Roger. And his other epithet is the Dark King, Mayo. All right, and I'm like, ooh, the Dark King Silvers Rayleigh. Now, on top of sounding really, really badass, which is, I'm pretty sure, the main reason Oda gave him that, I've always been curious, like, how did he get the title of the Dark King? You know, that's something impressive. That's something powerful. You don't give somebody the title of the Dark King and not have it be, like, he really is, like, the final boss in a video game, you know what I mean? You know, the whole idea that, like, Luffy's eventually gonna have to fight Shanks and like maybe a Davy back is like that's a theory at the end of One Piece. Screw that. Let's have hidden boss. So Luffy fights against Shanks and then he's like he wins or something. He wins the Davy back and he's like, oh, Luffy, you're a true pirate. And then like the hidden bonus stage is Luffy has to fight Rayleigh. It's like in the original Pokemon where if you enter that right glitch, you can go and fight Oak. You know, like it's kind of like that, right? Okay, yeah, I want to see Zoro fight Rayleigh at the end. Screw Mihawk or whatever. That's the final battle I want to see, right? Okay, so the popular theory that kind of like, it was a popular theory. It's also like the simplest one. Like if you think about it for only like 5 seconds, you know, why would Rayleigh be called the Dark King? It was like, oh, I know, hockey, right? Because you got armament hockey. So one variation of armament hockey, the simplest version, the one that's like the easiest to pick up with armament, is the vulcanization hockey or the hardening, okay? Where your body gets that black sheen of like vulcanization and then you punch things really hard and it, you know, gives you kind of a set of armor, you know, protects you, but it also allows you to damage Logias and stuff like that, right? So obviously, Rayleigh is not just a master of that particular type of armament hockey, and he's not even just a master of armament in general. He's kind of, like I said, a master of all forms of hockey because he's had all this time to, like, max out all of his stats. Rayleigh never got executed. He never got sick. He's just a really strong old man. He's not as strong as he used to be, but he's still really up there. Dude's pushing 80 and still crazy powerful, okay? He can just swim across the open ocean and just take out sea kings along the way, and it's just like his morning exercises. He's really badass. Okay, so the idea is like, oh, maybe he's just really, really good at the hardening type of armament hockey. That's why he has the title. Okay, that's one way of looking at it. But then I stop for a moment and I'm like, well, wait a second. If Rayleigh was, like, gifted with that particular type of hockey, like if that was what he was known for, to the point where he was so damn good at the hardening aspect of armament, not the emission type or, like, the destruction type, you know, he could do those too, but that was the type of hockey he was just so gifted at, they named him after it, the Dark King. That was the main reason. I find it a little strange that, for that reason, we have never seen Rayleigh using a black blade. You know, the ultimate culmination of armament hockey, that specific type, is making your blade a black blade. Now, we know that there's a couple of other really strong characters in One Piece, like Odin, for example, was never able to turn the Enma or Ame no Habakiri into black swords, and Odin was crazy strong, and Mihawk had a black blade, and Ryuma had a black blade, and the idea is like, dude, if anybody in this world would have had a black blade, you'd think it would be Rayleigh, okay? So, I posted this on Twitter earlier today, or X. A bunch of people had their different ideas on exactly why he was given the title of Mayo, of Dark King, so we're going to go through some of those results today. And one person actually brought up, hey, what if Rayleigh had, you know, that wasn't the sword he made a black sword. Maybe he had other black blades. You know, he has like a cavalcade of swords, as it were. And that got me interested in like, well, wait a minute. I think Rayleigh has used different swords. So I went back through the series, all the times we see Rayleigh, like in the past, and then at Sabaody, and then after the 2-year time skip. And yeah, so far, from my knowledge, we have seen Rayleigh utilize 3 different types of swords. So way back when he was a member of Roger's crew, when they were fighting Whitebeard on that island during Odin's flashback, we see him very clearly utilizing a saber, like a cutlass-type sword that has like a handguard. It's very similar to Ace, which was Roger's sword, okay? So he has that sword, you know, 30-something years ago, and he uses that during his tenure as a member of the Roger Pirates as the vice captain, okay? That blade was not a black blade. Then 20-something years later, when we first get introduced to Rayleigh at Sabaody, and then he goes to fight Kizaru to help the Straw Hats get away, we see him using a long sword. Now, in the anime, we get to see it very clearly. It has a very distinctive guard. It's clearly not a saber. It's clearly not a cutlass. It's like a super long sword or whatever. I went in the manga just to double check if it was the same thing, because sometimes the anime will screw around with that and like change the shape of the guard or the tsuba or something. But in this case, no. I mean, it's a little hard to see in the manga, but you can clearly tell in the panels that it is a very long sword that has that kind of guard that you like see right here, okay? So there's that sword that he uses there. And then after the time skip, when Luffy and the gang are reuniting on Sabaody and they're heading out to the Sunny to go and, go down to Fishman Island and continue their adventure, the Marines are chasing after them, and Rayleigh has that really badass scene where he like takes out a sword, draws a line in the dirt, and he's like, you guys should let my apprentice go. I mean, you can chase after him if you want, but you'd have to cross this line, and I don't recommend it. You'd have to cross this line, and you're really not gonna do that, So in that situation, the sword was neither a cutlass, nor was it this long sword that he used against Kizaru. It was a katana, like an ordinary katana. So that proves that Rayleigh definitely has, like, swords laying around there. Somebody even mentioned, like, what if Rayleigh just, like, sold his swords for booze? And at first I'm like, oh, there's no way. Rayleigh would never hawk a black blade that he infused with his own hockey for a couple of, like, shots of whiskey at the bar. And then I thought for a moment, I'm like, well, wait a minute. What if we are literally doing the thing where Rayleigh has won the video game, he's beaten the video game, and he's still playing it, and he's just so bored at this point, he's just like, I've done everything I could possibly do in this game. Yeah, sure, take this ultimate level 99 sword that I upgraded it. I'll trade it in for cash. Who cares at this point? Yeah, all right, I'm going to the gambling hall. I'm going to the bar. It's like, give me your finest whiskey, sir. It could have been something like that. It really could have been. So Rayleigh is definitely a man of many different pointy objects. He has certainly used a sword or a saber or a cutlass or a long sword or a bastard sword, as you were, many times in his lifetime. But none of the blades we've seen him use were ever black blades. He's clearly skilled in all types of hockey, but I don't think the reason he's called the Dark King is specifically because of that, all right? It might be an interesting way to tie it together, but that's not the reason, okay? So somebody else over on Twitter took the kanji, Mei-O, dark and king, and put it in translator, and it was like, hey, it just comes out directly to Hades, right? And I'm like, I didn't know that. And I'm like, so Hades, so like the Greek god or Greek overlord of the underworld, or in Roman, it would be Pluto. Say hi to Pluto, everybody. Hi, Pluto, how you doing? It's great we have high-definition video of you after all this time. But anyway, yeah, so, it's Hades, right? Like, literally Hades. And so that, wait a minute, hold on. So we have Rayleigh, the vice captain of the Roger Pirates, who is the Dark King, which just means Hades. And then we have Zoro, who is the King of Hell, or he wields Enma, which the kanji for Enma literally mean ruler of hell, the judge of hell, the king of hell, all right? So that's an interesting comparison, and we already have known, like, there's comparisons between Zoro and Rayleigh. I mean, that's so obvious. Like, they both have scars. They were both vice captains. Roger was the Pirate King. Luffy is 99.9999% going to be the Pirate King. You don't know, though. You don't know. There's that 0.00001% chance. Maybe Luffy doesn't get all the bananas. Who knows? Like, whatever. Maybe it's Buggy at the end of the day. But now Luffy's going to be the Pirate King. So there's so many different parallels between Roger and Luffy, and there's also a lot of parallels between Rayleigh and Zoro. So it's interesting to think that, like, okay, Zoro is the king of hell with Enma, and then Rayleigh was the Dark King, Mei-O, or the ruler of the underworld, or Hades himself. Man, okay, I didn't think Rayleigh could get any cooler, but now thinking of Rayleigh as just Hades, he somehow got cooler, right? Right? Okay, but that only shows us more of a comparison between Zoro and Rayleigh. It doesn't actually answer the question of why is he called the Dark King. It's cool that he's the, ruler of the underworld and Zoro's the king of hell. That's a cool comparison, but that doesn't answer the question. or does it? Okay? Because the reason that Zoro said, I'm the king of hell, is because Enma literally translates to king of hell. We do not know the name of Rayleigh's sword, and in which case I should say swords because he's used multiple swords. I'm going to assume this sword right here, when we see him in the flashback, this cutlass kind of sword with the guard, that was his main sword. That is like his Wado Ichimonji, and I do think he still has it, although him pawning it for booze money is really funny. But I think he still has that. It's at Shaki's bar. It's in a chest in his bedroom, or it's hanging up on the wall. It's his memory of the time when he served the king of the pirates, okay? He doesn't bust it out very often, okay? He has other swords. Like, it's the same thing. Like, I can imagine... Picture Zoro at, like, Rayleigh's age. Picture Zoro, like, 60 years in the future, where Zoro is around 81 years old, okay? And a new batch of pirates are, up and coming in the world, and then, Zoro meets them in the Sabaody Archipelago or something, and then he stops an admiral from attacking them, something like that. I don't think Zoro might be busting out the Wado for that. He might be using the Sandai for that. He might be using another one of his swords that he's picked up over the years. And in fact, actually, if you look at the SBS, when Oda draws Zoro older in the good universe, it's like, I'm 4 sword style Zoro at age 40, and then at age 60, he's like, I'm 5 sword style. So maybe at age 80, Zoro will have 6 sword style, one in his right hand, one in his left, one in his mouth, one between his butt cheeks, one, and no, that's 4, and then 5 or 6 are his ears or his knees or his toes or something. He's walking around on top like stilts. He's using katanas at stilts. He's like this horrible, like, I am 6 sword style, Well, it's better than another place he could have put it, but you know what I mean? It's just like, yeah. So, Zoro might be not going around. He might take, his Wado Ichimonji, and it might have become a black sword at that point, and he's, like, gonna hang it up somewhere and never, like, use it unless it's, like, for a really, really, really good reason. Same thing with Rayleigh here. Like, I'm sure he still has the cutlass, right? Some people brought up the idea of propaganda, how, like, Morgans is kind of pushing Luffy into the spotlight and building him up of how powerful he is and everything like that, and it's, like, manipulation of things in the world, just to be, like, more sensationalism for the world at large, right? So it could be something like that. Like, Rayleigh could have just been really cruel in battle. He might have just been a real big badass, and then just cutting everybody down. He's like, oh, he's so ruthless. He's like some evil king, or, the Dark King, or the King of Darkness, or something like that, and he just threw that on there as an epithet, and Rayleigh wouldn't really have a chance to, like, well, that's what they're calling me, I guess I just gotta roll with it, right? It could have been something like that, quite possibly. The one that I think makes the most sense, and there's a lot of ways to even break this down, but at the baseline, it's the idea that Rayleigh, just like Zoro, is kind of in the shadow of their captain. Now, I'm not saying that in, like, a bad way. Like, oh, everybody's paying attention to Roger. No one cared about Rayleigh. No, a lot of people knew about Rayleigh, and they continue to fear Rayleigh. It's not like Rayleigh showed up at Amazon Lily, and Blackbeard was like, wait, who are you again? Oh, that's right. You were some random dude that was second fiddle to the Pirate King. I don't care about you. Oh, no, they all still cared about him. So not in the sense of the shadows, but the idea that, like, and there's so many different ways to take this, but the idea that, like, at first it's like, okay, Roger was the Pirate King, Luffy's gonna be the Pirate King, but their second in command help them get there. That's how powerful they are, okay? Now, if you look at it from the comparison of, like, Joy Boy and Luffy's Gear 5th and the Sun God, Nika, and everything like that, this is even cooler, all right? Think of it this way, okay? So Luffy has parallels to the sun, okay, and very much the sun and the heavens, okay? So you can think of the heavens, Luffy is the sun god, it makes sense, that tracks. Then you have Zoro, who is the king of hell, so it's an opposite. Don't think of it like good and evil. Don't think of it like Luffy objectively good, Zoro objectively evil. That doesn't work for either of them, really. Zoro is not evil, Luffy is not objectively good, okay? So, not in that context, but in just the context of, like, heaven, sun, sky, up, Zoro, darkness, demons, because he's always compared to demons, hell, Enma, underworld, that kind of deal. All right. Yeah, that kind of idea. All right. So think of it in that situation. And so Roger and Rayleigh kind of same deal there as well. I also wanted to break down a little bit about hockey again, because sitting down and doing some, research into like hockey after, Wano, because Wano, we learned a lot about armament hockey there. Okay. And so there's 3 basic types of armament hockey that we know so far, okay? We got the basic type, which is, the vulcanization type. And then we got the emission type. That's the type that Sentomaru uses, like Ashigara Dokoi and like shockwaves, like knocking Luffy away. And then we had, so on the wiki, it was referred to as Naibu Hakai, or internal destruction, but I'm just going to call it destruction hockey or Hakai hockey, because that makes me think of like Dragon Ball with like Beerus and like da 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 Hakai. Like that makes me think of that. So we got hardening, emission, and destruction hockey. Now, one reason I didn't want that the Mayo title to be just armament is because a lot of times, like, the vulcanization version of hockey is usually regarded as the weakest. Because think about it, that's the first version everybody learns. Like, Luffy learned it right after the time skip, right? It took him a while to learn the emission types and then the destruction types, which are more advanced. You have every time a character goes full body hardening, like Virgo or Pika, they almost immediately get one shot by somebody, right? And so that's kind of like a joke. Like, he's like, oh, that's the weakest form of armament. So I was like, oh, well, he's not going to be called the Dark King because he's mastered the weakest form of hockey. But I think I've been thinking about this the wrong way. I've been going about this from the wrong angle. It's not that the hardening type of hockey, like the type of hockey, is the weakest necessarily. It's just the easiest to learn. It's the first thing you pick up when you learn armament. It's the first form of hockey that Luffy, Sanji, and Zoro picked up during their training, okay? So once again, I'm going to compare this to an RPG or like a video game, all right? So let's say you're playing this RPG, and at level 3, you unlock hardening, okay? And then at level 20, you unlock emission hockey. And then at level 50, you unlock Hakai, or destruction hockey. However, with each of those types of hockey, you can put more levels into them to increase them. You can put points into them, as it were, okay? So, like, you could play the game where it's like, okay, I've unlocked hardening at level 3. I'm going to just spend all my time putting points and levels into that. Not so much into anything else, but by the time I'm done, I'm going to be a master of this type of hockey, which is still really strong, okay? So, and I just made up these numbers for the sake of just demonstrating it. But let's take somebody like Sentomaru. So Sentomaru obviously was focused on emission type hockey, okay? So let's say out of the 3 categories, out of all of the levels, Sentomaru put the most points in emission hockey, but not as much in the hardening or destruction hockey, okay? So therefore, he's still pretty strong in emission, but, weak in the relatively easy-to-learn hardening, something like that. Because I don't think we've ever really seen Sentomaru use the normal hardening technique. He's like a sumo wrestler, so he focuses on the emission types, okay? Katakuri, great. This is actually a great example. Katakuri, 48 years old, this really strong Yonko commander, did not really use emission hockey or destruction hockey all that much. Katakuri's focus was definitely observation because of his future sight, but he was no slouch when it came to armament either. But the only form of armament we saw with Katakuri was the hardening type, okay? He used it with his own fists and in conjunction with his Mochi Mochi no Mi. So what if Katakuri's hockey looked something like this, where he put all of his levels, all of his points into hardening, and not so much into emission or destruction. But because he put all of those levels into hardening, it was really strong, even stronger than Luffy's, okay? And then you have somebody like Rayleigh, who just maxed out everything, like level 99 in hardening, emission, and destruction. Rayleigh could just do Hakai and it would probably work, right? But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. That's nothing really directly to do with Rayleigh and his title, but I just wanted to bring that up because I was, reading a lot about hockey today. And Hakai, it seems, right? So yeah, I think I'm going to go with all these different ideas. Thanks to everybody on Twitter for giving me your opinions on this. I like the idea of, one of Rayleigh's swords, his original sword, might have been like Hades. It might have just been called that. And it might have been a Saijo Awazumono named Hades. And that's where he got the title of the Dark King, Meo. And so then there's a parallel to that with Zoro and Enma. And that's where it came from, okay? Also in the comparison of like Roger being in the spotlight and then Rayleigh being the one in the shadows, okay? Those all work really well. So, yeah, that's the video. Hope you all enjoyed. Thanks for everybody's input over on Twitter. And yeah, I wasn't planning on doing this today. I was hoping the chapter was going to be out today, but it looks like that's not going to be out till either later tonight or tomorrow. So I'm really excited for the new One Piece chapter 1104. And so that'll be out as soon as it's out. Thanks for watching and teching. Barry and not Barry's dad is no longer here, so we don't have to worry about him anymore. Bye, everybody!